Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. If you are new here, click the subscribe button. Also, if you are new here, hi, hello, my name is Kayla, and today I'm going to be doing my second baby's birth story. If you didn't see, I just told my first baby's birth story just a few days ago, so if you want to go over there and click on that video first and then come back, definitely do that. But today is going to be baby number two's birth story. So the original video I actually had to take down and private it because I have my son in it and I don't show my kids anymore, but I still want my birth story to be public. So that is what I'm doing here today. So let's jump right into it. So this kind of all starts around 34 weeks. I had prodromal labor, which is essentially stop and start labor. So my labor started around 34 weeks, and I would have contractions for an hour, they would go away for an hour. And I would have contractions for an hour, they would go away for an hour. And this went on almost every single day from the day I turned 34 weeks. I was having prodromal labor ever since 34 weeks. It was extremely exhausting. I was up on my water intake, so I know that that had like nothing to do with it. I actually, the very first time that it happened, I almost had to go to the hospital. I was like, if I have one more contraction, we are going to the hospital. And I did not have another contraction. So I think that kind of like scared my body and was like, no, I'm just kidding. Just pulling a prank on you. But it was not a funny prank. But ever since 34 weeks to 38 weeks, I had contractions every single day. And it was extremely exhausting. So fast forward to 37 weeks and 6 days. I was like, since I had my baby at 37 weeks, my first baby at 37 weeks and 6 days, I guarantee I'm gonna go earlier than that because that's usually what happens, right? Wrong. I made it to 38 weeks, and that had been my longest pregnancy, and it still is my longest pregnancy. Absolutely insane. But I made it to 38 weeks, and I was livid. Let me tell you, my first birth, I did not have a single contraction for weeks. And then all of a sudden I went into labor before 38 weeks. And now I'm sitting here 38 weeks, 4 weeks of contractions, and I was livid. I didn't even film a 38-week pregnancy update because I was just so mad that I was 38 weeks. I don't think you can like really truly grasp what that's like if you've never really been in that situation. If my first pregnancy had gone longer than 38 weeks, I don't think I would have been so mad, but my first pregnancy didn't. So anyway, now on to the whole birth story. I know that was kind of like a long tangent, but I was 38 weeks and 2 days pregnant. And this entire day, I started having very regular contractions, and to the point where like I would have to stop and like, this is a real contraction, kind of like work my way through them. And my daughter was very clingy that entire day. And it's so crazy how much children can like know what is going on. She knew something was happening, and she would not let me go that entire day, which like I was not mad about. I look back on that day and like I love that day so much because that was the day of just her and I. Like that was just her and I, and we had that entire day to just sit down and watch movies, and it felt really good. But that entire day I would have contractions 10 minutes apart the entire day. I tried getting them closer together. They would not get closer together until that night around, I want to say it was like 10 o'clock at night. My husband was going to bed and I started having more and regular contractions. So I actually started timing them. At this point, my husband had fell asleep. He knew that I was having contractions, but he was like, well, you know, you've been having contractions for the last 4 weeks. Do we really think that it's it? So he fell asleep and I started timing my contractions. And very, very, very quickly, they turned into something that was regular. So it was around 12:30. I started getting ready and I was like, this is definitely the real deal. Like, these haven't let up for hours. They're getting closer together. I have to stop and moan my way through them. I have to breathe my way through them. And I was like, this is definitely the real deal. So I had decided to get up and get ready. And I actually did my makeup and I did my hair, and that made me feel so good. The entire pregnancy, I did not feel good. I did not feel like myself. I felt horrible the entire pregnancy. So it was around 1:30. I actually believe it was about 1:20. I decided to wake my husband up and I was like, we gotta go. I'm having very regular contractions. They are now 5 minutes apart and we gotta go. So at my last prenatal visit, I believe I was 4 centimeters. I was 4 centimeters dilated at my last appointment. So I know that all of those contractions were definitely doing something to my cervix. But anyway, we head to the hospital. It's about 10 minutes away. We had actually brought our daughter at this point because I had such false labor. You're just gonna hear my kids in the background. But since I had such false labor for 4 weeks at that point, we were like, let's just take her just in case it's not the real thing. We don't have to wake up our in-laws, well, my in-laws, and we can just like go from there and see what's gonna go on. This was before the whole COVID thing. Actually, this was a month before, so there's that. But we arrived at the hospital at 1:30 in the morning. I had to wake my daughter up. I felt so bad. I had to wake her up in the middle of the night to take her to the hospital, but she didn't mind. She had slept for a little bit and she was like all rambunctious. But anyway, so we got to the hospital at 1:30 in the morning. This was on February 2nd. They got me in there, and since it wasn't my first baby, they were like, let's check you immediately. They checked me and it was 4.5 centimeters dilated. A little bit goes by and my husband decides to take our daughter to my in-laws and just drop her off and say like, here she is for the night. We had everything that she needed and everything like that. So we were able to just take her over there and drop her off. And she decided to not sleep that entire night, which, sorry. Immediately once I got in there, they had hooked me up to the monitors and everything. They just wanted to check my contractions. My contractions were very regular. I believe at this time they were about 4 minutes apart. At 3:05, they decided to check me again. It had been an hour and a half at that point, and I knew I wanted to get the epidural and everything, so we were just kind of waiting for my cervix to change in order for me to get the epidural. I was still about 4.5 centimeters, but she said I was a little bit looser. So they decided to call my doctor and see what they wanted to do with me, whether to send me home or whether to keep me and just kind of monitor me and see how fast I dilate. At 3:30, they took me off the monitors. They had told me that my doctor wanted to keep me for just a little bit longer. This was also the doctor that delivered my first baby. I have like such a great relationship with her. Like, she was an amazing midwife. I adore her so much, and I'm so sad that she's not at the practice anymore. They decided to take me off of the monitors. They were going to keep me for just a little bit longer and see if I dilate. This time I decided to get into the bath. The contractions were kind of amping up. They were getting very, very, very strong, and I was kind of in a lot of pain. I think I had only spent about 10 to 15 minutes in the bath at this point, and I was like, these contractions are just way too strong. I need some medication. So I got out of the bath and I called the nurse in and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, these contractions are getting very, very, very strong. Can I get some medicine for this? And she was like, oh, let me check you again. So they checked me and I was 5 centimeters dilated. So this is now at 4 o'clock and they checked me. I was 5 centimeters dilated. I was fully admitted at this point, which meant that my contractions were doing something. They were seeing change, and so that is the time that I asked for the epidural. At 4:20 in the morning, I got my IV. They started me on a bag of fluids for the epidural. At 5 o'clock, I got my epidural. We had no complications with the epidural at all. It was really, really good. After about 10 minutes, I was completely numb, which such a relief. Right after I got my epidural, they put a catheter in me. Obviously, gotta have a catheter when you have an epidural. And let me just say, once I get the catheter out, it is very, very, very hard to pee. It burns. It burns. But also at 5:15, when I got my catheter, they had checked me again, and I was about 6.5 to 7 centimeters dilated. At 5:40, I started feeling very, very nauseous from the epidural and the labor and all of that. I called the nurse in and I was like, I'm feeling very nauseous, and I was hoping that she would like give me something for it. She was like, do you want a bag for this? And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna throw up. I'm just like very, very nauseous. That's also one thing during all of my pregnancies and birth is I've never thrown up. So yay me, but the nausea is horrible. I had actually declined the little bag that you can like throw up in. I was like, I don't think I'm gonna throw up. Like I wanted something like anti-nausea med, and they were like, oh, we can't do that. So I was like, okay. So at 6 o'clock, they started turning me over to my side and like flip-flopping me. They could not get the monitors to show my contractions. And this is kind of where everything goes really weird for my birth. It was really, really, really weird. So the monitors were not showing my contractions, and they didn't know why. They were like trying to make them on the monitor. They were moving the monitor. They were moving these from side to side. They could not get my contractions on the monitors at all. So they just kind of had to guess. And because I had the epidural at this point, I have no idea if I was actually still contracting. It was kind of weird how it all happened, and I will kind of go into that in just a minute. But yeah, it was definitely weird. So 7:35 in the morning rolls around, and this is actually around the time that I thought that I would be giving birth. But because my contractions kind of stalled a little bit, they have no idea why. They don't know if I was even having contractions at this point, which is so strange. But they decided to check me, and the nurse said that she could stretch me to a 9. But I don't think that's right, because the next nurse that came in said that I was an 8. So we're gonna go with being an 8.5. At 8 o'clock, I started feeling very itchy, and that is actually very common with the epidural as well. I did not feel itchy in my first labor and birth, but it is actually really, really common that you can feel itchiness from the epidural. At 9 o'clock, they decided to check me again, and I was still 8 centimeters dilated. At 9 o'clock, they decided to just break my water and see if that helps, maybe make him descend and make me dilate faster, more efficiently, because at this point it had been over 2 hours of me stuck at 8 centimeters dilated, which was very, very, very frustrating. I was like, why isn't my body just doing it? And in fact, at this point, I actually broke down, because I was like, what is going on? Like, my body has done this before. Like, why? It just felt like my body was failing me one last time in this pregnancy. My body had failed me multiple times in that entire pregnancy, and it was very, very hard mentally to like grasp that my body was failing me multiple times, and then obviously to go through birth and everything and have it happen again was very, very, very discouraging. Like, why is my body not doing what it's meant to do? So from 9 o'clock to 10:20, I just sat in the bed, and at 10:20, my midwife comes in, and she was like, I think we should start you on some Pitocin. She checked me again and I was still 8 centimeters dilated. So also at this point, they weren't able to still get my contractions on the monitor. So they don't even know if I was having contractions that entire time. They don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I just stalled at 8 centimeters dilated, and it was so extremely frustrating. So she said, you know, you might have to go to a 2 on Pitocin, maybe a 4 on Pitocin, but we'll just see what happens. And I gave my consent. I was like, yeah, let's do this. My body's not doing what it needs to do. You know, at this point, I had been stalled for hours at 8 centimeters and they weren't able to get my contractions. So we decided to start Pitocin. If I had gone unmedicated, that would not have been my decision to go to have Pitocin. But since I did have an epidural, I was like, whatever. At 10:30, I felt the coolest thing. It wasn't just pressure. I actually felt the fetal ejection reflex, which is the coolest experience ever. I actually felt my body pushing, and it actually concerned me because I still had the epidural, and I was like, am I pushing? Like, am I pushing, or is my body pushing? And I called the nurse in and I was like, I think I'm pushing. And she comes and she's like, oh no, you're still not fully dilated. And I was like, oh, well, I was literally just pushing, like, and she was like, oh yeah, that's the fetal ejection reflex. You can feel that. And so he definitely descended from that point. She said I was still 8 centimeters, but lower. So that pushing was definitely my body doing the work. At about 10:48, my doctor comes in and she was like, let's have a baby. She was like, I can do this thing that's called manual dilation, where you can push and I can just kind of move your cervix out of the way. And I had said, yes, let's try that. Let's do that. And so I started pushing at 10:50 in the morning, and I had a very hard time pushing because my epidural at this point was completely worn off. When I tell you I felt the ring of fire, I felt the ring of fire. And if you don't know what the ring of fire is, it is when your baby's head is crowning, and it's literally a ring of fire. So after about 1 contraction, we got the rest of my cervix out of the way, and it was time to fully push out the baby at that point. After 5 minutes of pushing, my baby was out. He was born at 10:55 a.m. and he weighed 6 pounds 13 ounces. And 20.5 inches long. He is definitely my longest baby. Had the cord wrapped around his neck, so they just like, it's actually very common for babies to have a cord wrapped around their neck, and it's not a concern. I had no idea about this at all when it was happening in the moment, and she was like, oh, there's a nuchal, and which I knew that meant the cord was around the neck. She just like pulled it off and it was perfectly fine. This is actually kind of the part that I don't like as much. The nurse had placed a blanket over my chest, which, okay, you're wanting to wipe off the baby, okay. But the thing is, I didn't get immediate skin to skin contact. And that's what I had in my birth plan. And that's actually what they do at this hospital. Like, that's policy. That's what they did with my first baby at this hospital, was immediate skin to skin, like skin to skin, not skin to blanket to skin. And I didn't get immediate skin to skin for about 10 to 15 minutes after he was born. I actually tried placing him, like on my skin, and the nurse had moved the blanket and put a new one underneath him, and I was like, no, that's not what I want. Because at this time I was in a daze. I was in the full-blown birth daze that they talk about. He actually had bruising on his face from how fast he came out as well. The bruising was horrible. Like, his entire face was black and blue, and from how fast he came out, and it made me feel so horrible because I'm like, I am so sorry, buddy. But it was crazy how fast babies heal. Within the first 24 hours, all of the bruising was gone on his face, which was phenomenal. Also, we didn't know this at the time, but when we were checked, I believe he was checked at 5 days old at the pediatrician, and he was like, oh, he broke his clavicle. My baby had broken his clavicle from coming out as well. So yeah, that was fabulous. We actually never had like a follow-up for it, so I mean, he's almost 3 now, so there's that. He actually didn't cry when he came out, and they were actually very, very concerned about that. His tones weren't looking good. He wasn't pinking up, so they actually had to take him away almost immediately to get him to cry. And actually, he didn't cry. They had put like a little suction thing on his face and like sucked some stuff out of his lungs. And then about 5 minutes later, they brought him over to me and did skin to skin, and that was amazing. But to this day, he's still not a huge crier, and his entire baby years, like, he never cried. That kid, it was so chill. Why? I'm filming for YouTube, Jesus. So when they sat me up, I actually had a little bit more bleeding than they had wanted to see. So they gave me a little bit of Pitocin through my IV, and the bleeding had stopped. They did not give me a fundal massage. Every few hours, like every half hour, I want to say, they would come in and just like press on my uterus, but they didn't do like a full fundal massage like I had in my 3rd delivery. So I did hemorrhage just a little bit. It wasn't full-blown hemorrhage though, like it was with my 3rd baby. I also got him to latch immediately, and that was really, really nice. Also, that that night we were in the maternity ward, and we had our daughter come and meet him. That was literally the best thing ever. Like, I love that video so much. Obviously I can't show that anymore, but meeting him was like such a slap of reality. When she came in, I realized how big she was, and that is such a mind fuck. It truly is. It's crazy, and it's sad, and it's bittersweet, and like it was just everything I've ever wanted. And so that is the birth of my rainbow baby. Crazy that it's almost been 3 years since that day, and he's almost 3 years old. I can't believe it. It's gone so fast. It's gone so fast. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye, guys.